We are joined from Aed Yaghi, Director at Palestinian Medical Relief Society. Mr. Aed, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. First off, if you can delve into the humanitarian challenges that are emerging in Beit Lahia as a result of the recent airstrikes. Mr. Aed, can you hear me?
Good evening to you and to your dear audience. What happens in Beit Lahia and northern Gaza and in Gaza Strip generally is not only a humanitarian tragedy, but it's also a genocide that takes place live. The whole world watches what happens today. We're talking about to win a continuous destruction of northern Gaza, Jabalia and Beit Lahia and the surrounding areas, and the killing of thousands of people, in addition to stopping the work of the health systems. We're talking about 3 main hospitals which are already small. They worked partially in order to help in the medication of the injured people of Palestine, but these hospitals are no longer operating. They do not also receive the injured people. The civil defense and the ambulance authorities do not also work in Gaza. They cannot move, and they do not have any tools or cars that can move to help people. We are talking here about starvation in northern Gaza. The residents of northern Gaza are facing starvation. We're talking about hundreds of injured people and lost people who are still under the rebels. No one can provide any aid for them. This is the reality lived in Gaza Strip. Of course, we have to remember that it was supposed last week that the second round of polio vaccination to deliver vaccination to almost 120,000 children in Gaza City. But we couldn't conduct this vaccination campaign, and the medical staff couldn't deliver this campaign because of the siege of the northern Gaza. This is the humanitarian reality that the whole world watches, and they haven't moved so far. We are warning against the spread of many diseases due to the accumulated corpse under the rebels until now in Gaza Strip.
Regarding the international condemnation we're witnessing, how effective do you think it could be in mitigating humanitarian crises, and what are the current expectations for its impact on the situation in Gaza?
Unfortunately, all the condemnations and the international efforts are through statements that show their denouncement of what happens in Gaza Strip, but so far we haven't witnessed any real step to stop this aggression and to allow the access to aid and medical supplies. A few days ago, we heard about many callings from Kamal Adwan Hospital to allow the medical staff to enter northern Gaza, especially the surgeons, to help the injured people. But unfortunately, up till now, no international organization managed to enter what's needed, either the medical staff, surgeons, medicines, drinking water, or even food to the citizens who are under siege up till now in northern Gaza Strip. The international community just looks and sees this tragedy, this genocide, and they do nothing. Even the Israeli authorities 2 days ago took a decision to ban UNRWA from operating in the Palestinian territories, which will increase the humanitarian crisis and medical crisis in the Strip, in which the UNRWA provides lots of services either at the health level or the aids provided to the residents of Gaza.
Sir, if you can expand more on the ways that these escalating airstrikes in northern Gaza threaten the safety of civilians, especially in densely populated areas like Beit Lahia?
Definitely, we're talking about Palestinian victims, Palestinian martyrs, exceeding 53,000. 10,000 of them are still under the rebels, and more than 100,000 injured people. Most of this figure consists of women and children. We're talking about more than 17,000 children killed with cold blood. Tens of thousands of women also were killed. So the occupation forces target the disarmed civilians who had to displace from their homes to shelters or to the homes of their relatives. But all of these places are not safe despite of the claims published from time to time by the occupation forces that they provide safe corridors and safe places for the displaced people, which is very hypocritical and very lying. What we are looking forward to is a real stop for this genocide taking place in Gaza Strip since October 7th of last year until now.
Speaking of the coping mechanisms of the families in Beit Lahia, are there any resources that are available to them as they seek shelter?
Definitely, there is nothing. Our staff, or the remaining staff, told us that there is no shelter for these citizens. Yesterday, we heard about a massacre committed in a home that included more than 120 people. Can you imagine this? The remaining homes or the remaining places that are valid for living include tens, even sometimes hundreds of people in them because there are no places for shelter. As I mentioned, even the remaining food supply and water are totally out of service for the citizens.
So the United Nations has condemned these recent airstrikes on Beit Lahia. What actions has the UN Human Rights Office proposed in response to these airstrikes?
Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, they're not sufficient. Palestinian people are looking for real procedures and actions to stop this genocide and to provide the humanitarian aid, medical supplies and food supplies and water to the people in Gaza and the essentials of shelter, including tents and winter clothes and so on. Up till now, this hasn't happened. Indeed, the international organization, especially the Human Rights Council, issued a statement, but this statement is just ink on paper for the occupation forces that are not deterred until now, and they haven't obeyed any of these resolutions or aspiration from October 7th.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aed, for your information and your insights.